Welcome to Rule of Thirds, a program on the Screen Refresh Network where our goal every episode is to select a different topic and create a memorable list of our choices. For this episode, I'm your host, Nick, and I'm joined by the rest of the Screen Refresh crew, Dean and Tim.
Too bad you will die.
Hello, boys. I'm back.
Our topic today is covering our most memorable, or at least we're covering sequels today. I don't know if they're going to be most memorable.
Well, things can be memorable for good and bad reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true. I know my pick, it left such a bad taste in my mouth that I will never forget it, but it is not it's not even the same building as where my top 10 list of movies is. I don't even think it's in the same continent or sector in the universe. That's how bad it is to me.
Okay, so your least favorite sequels.
Well, at least for me, anyway. I remember a previous episode we were talking about how we always pick the best of whatever topic. We never talk about ones that are like, you know what? No, I don't like this.
I mean, I think we like to raise things up that we enjoy rather than dunking on things that we don't.
I mean, I love dunking.
Because everybody out there has probably put a lot of time and effort into work. Usually, sometimes, has put a lot of time and effort into working on some of these things. I can see if it's something like
I'm going to remember that then when we do basketball finally. You know, Tim, a lot of people put a lot of time and effort into this movie.
And I agree. I think those things, even though it's not my cup of tea, I think it should still be applauded for, hey, you know what? You had an idea, you executed it.
My pick, a lot of time definitely went into it. I don't know if anything else did.
It's Boyhood by Richard Linklater. Time is the only thing that's gone into this.
I liked Boyhood.
Would you like to go first then, Dean?
Yeah, I'm talking about Boyhood.
What's it a sequel to?
This is going to be a long episode. The sequel to Boyhood. Manhood?
Tree of Life?
Teenagerhood? Yeah, I'll start. On
your time.
There's nothing really to set up this. This IP is near and dear to my heart.
He's trying to think of it right now in real time.
This sequel is not held within my heart. It is 1997's Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
You didn't like it?
I think I liked it for a day after I saw it at the time, and then, or maybe the next time I saw it, I realized, man, this. I mean, as a kid, I was a Mortal Kombat fanatic.
I'm surprised as a kid.
Great, there's another movie.
Especially as a kid, you were able to see through the bullshit that they made.
Well, I didn't like it at first. It was like, oh, all my, they're fighting and all my characters. I really can't remember being that disappointed, but when it came out on home video, I just recall being like really underwhelmed, especially after watching the first movie so much. It's one of the most baffling.
Do you remember how long after the first viewing you went back to see it again?
It was the home video cycle at that point. So, but this one was a dud.
Like after the enjoyment sessions, like at what point did you revisit it? Because that happened to me. I saw it, I was like, yeah, Mortal Kombat 2, this is great, and then watched it like to death. And then like 15 years later, when I saw all this stuff of like the worst sequels of all time, and I saw it and I was like, no, it's not. And then I watched it again on like HBO Max and I was like, oh no, there are parts that are showing that should not in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to remember. It's
called suppression.
It just didn't get a cycle on my VCR at the time. Once I had gotten it, probably got it for Christmas or my birthday or something. I did see it in the theater. I remember being like, yes, Mortal Kombat, like, because I was still in the thick of loving the franchise, even though Mortal Kombat 4 had just come out. I think I loved that too, but people were like, that was a low point in Mortal Kombat's history. It was the first 3D game. But
because was 4 the introduction of weapons, or was that? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yes. and throwables,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and just being 3D.
I think it's the N64 era.
Yeah.
It dropped like a month before the sequel came out in theaters. But yeah, it was just like a lot of things you don't want to see happen when you're making a sequel. Like, yes, Robin Shou came back, Talisa Soto came back, for better or for worse.
At gunpoint.
She did fine as Katana, but I mean, in the first one, but man, the writing, just the filmmaking doesn't help the sequel. Everybody apparently got promoted because Paul Thomas Anderson didn't want to come back and do the sequel. He went and made Event Horizon. And they just the producer Lawrence Kasanoff just decided to promote the DP who had never directed anything. So that was his first.
That's why I think
experience.
you should never give DPs a chance at real directing.
I agree.
Wait, what is it you do again, Dean?
Try to DP when someone will let me.
I just the thing that always kind of weirded me out though is that I love the first movie, but that's not a good movie either. And what separates, and I'm being 100% serious and I'm trying to be civil, but like, what's the difference between the first one and the second one when they're both?
You can't see the difference. If you can't see the difference between the first and the second one, I mean,
I think the second one is clearly the worst script, or the worst script of the two. And I think where you have people shining through in the first one, that it's like, hey, like, what's his name? Carrie did a great job as like Shang Tsung and whatnot. In the second movie, there are so many lines that it's just, you can see them waiting for their paycheck of, if I say this, like, I'm looking at you, Sindel, if I say this, they will just pay me and I can move on to my next project.
The way that I look at the Mortal Kombat series is just, or not even the series, but at least in terms of the sequel, it's just, the 90s had a very bad run when it comes to video game adaptations for movies. And even though they kind of hit it with the first one, the sequel was exactly the same as all the rest of the attempted efforts, Uwe Boll being a not helping that genre whatsoever, but he did set that franchise back, just like movies being adapted from video games, back quite a bit because of his involvement with everything that he had done. But a lot of other video game movies, just, I kind of put it up there with it, but I don't know.
What, the first or the
Wait,
second?
what do you mean? Put it up there
The
with
second
what?
one. The second one. The first one was like one of the first ones ever to be made. And like in a timeline of movies, I really feel like it was like Super Mario Brothers, and then that one.
Street Fighter, and then Wing Commander, I think, and then Mortal Kombat came out, which was became a surprise hit. And I think, I would argue that movie just much more. It's funny, the budget was 18 million, I think, and the apparent budget for the sequel was 30 to 40 million, and I really can't tell that there's extra money being thrown into that movie.
I think also in the first movie, even if you take out the idea of ever playing the video game or being aware of Mortal Kombat as a video game, it didn't feel necessarily like this is a video game movie specifically only for people who like video games. It felt a lot like just a carryover of like the 80s action movies, of like the martial arts films, of like a Bloodsport or something of...
Yeah, it's a very classic hero's tale.
Whereas I feel like the second Mortal Kombat, there's so many things that just don't make sense, or just like these one-off non sequiturs of, well, now we're going to have this scene so we can show you this character for the games. And then it's just Liu Kang being like, hey, nice to meet you. And then it cuts and they're in a different place and they're doing something else. And it's like, it's all so lightly connected that it's clearly the only thing is to just keep showing you things from the video game. But if I'm watching it as just like, I want to see a martial arts film, it's disappointing.
I mean, they specifically added more fights into the movie because of having to reshoot and add 2 fights they added Scorpion versus Johnny Cage, I believe, and the reptile fight. Those were added fights to the movie. So they just center the movie around fights this time around as opposed to anything else, and stuffing characters that making a cameo, and then you don't see them anymore.
I think over the years, I had just put it in its own bucket that when I want to watch like a martial arts movie, I would pick that. I never watched it with the intention of this being I'm not watching this for the plot, so to speak. And I think that's why I kind of ignored Mortal Kombat 2's stance in the public eye, only because of that. Because I
But
do
how did
like
you feel
it.
about animalities?
I didn't care. I couldn't do them anyway, so
Well, neither could they.
Oh, supposedly they had the test screenings, and apparently that it was like killing in test screenings. And they were supposed to do a whole other round of editing and visual effects, but the New Line or whoever was like, people like it. Let's just put it out.
Wait, so that's the argument is just, hey, we did test screenings and we were ready to do reshoots and we had a new screenwriter going to do rewrites and punch-ups. And the audience said, we love it so much. No notes. Don't touch it.
That's what, I don't know if it was Kasanoff, the producer's words were, but somebody was quoted being like, yeah, they liked it. So they said, we don't need to do more to it.
I wonder if that was a conversation. It was like, did you guys like this? Yeah, it's okay. Okay. That's a wrap.
But imagine if you had a Street Fighter movie where Ken and Ryu show up for one scene and then you don't see them the rest of the movie.
yeah, they did that.
I mean,
it's Street Fighter, the thing of Chun-Li. I think that's basically what they did. It wasn't good.
I guess it
wasn't good, but
it's okay. If it's, I can only see it being that happening if it's called. Oh, was that the
Legend of Chun-Li or something?
That was
yeah,
the more recent one.
Yeah, it was like, I think 2008.
Right.
2009.
Yeah, I mean, Scorpion
And a
and
blonde and
Sub-Zero
Bison.
show up and they kind of fight, and then you don't see them ever again, and they're the two most popular characters from the game. But yeah, it's crazy that movie was made. Obviously, it was made because the first one was a hit. The producer had this whole grand scheme of media and just everything that exploded from the IP, and it just nothing came together. None of the actors wanted to come back, most of them anyway, and people didn't like that, myself included.
So at some point we'll cover it as a Screen and Refresh episode, I assume.
No, we got it just now. we
That
just
was
got
it. Okay, I guess.
You don't need to subject anyone to that.
If anybody asks, we'll be like, we did test screenings, and the audience said, you know what? We're actually fine with the rule of thirds on this. We don't need an episode. So we scrapped the whole thing.
I think
Understandable.
I think because my favorite characters too were done real dirty in that movie.
Which ones?
Yeah, you got to tell us.
Shiva, and I really hated Motaro's look. Just like he was my least favorite. Yeah, but is it? I forget his name.
Yeah,
It's been a long
Motaro,
time.
the Centaur.
Yeah, you said Motaro. Yeah, you said it.
Yeah, he was always he always kicked my ass in the game, and just by the time I got to him, like, oh, this is gonna be badass, and just you can clearly tell the entire budget went to doing his CGI.
I remember playing Motaro, and then I would just do the jumping heavy over and over and over and over again.
That's what he did.
Because the computer didn't handle it well. And I was like, yeah, I guess I'm a Motaro main now.
I didn't know that both Jax and Motaro, the actors, were American Gladiators. That's where they came from.
Oh, that I
had
didn't
no
know.
idea. Yeah.
I did like his fight though with what was it, Cyrax or one of the robots? When Jax finally gets his arms.
Jax and Cyrex, yeah.
Yeah, but then it's like, wasn't it towards the end of the movie? Then Jax realizes, like, I'm stronger without these. And they're not
I think they,
arm
like,
replacements. They're
malfunction
just
and-
attachments on his arm, and he rips them off and then finishes fighting Motaro.
I blame the
Right.
I blame the budget.
It's.
There's like no way to know what the hell those things were actually doing.
I'm talking myself into watching this again.
Don't do it.
I'll be the canary in that mine.
Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
So I guess I can go next so Nick can wrap up, because this is a film that Dean and his wife introduced me to this series. We had gone on a whim into the theater one time because you guys wanted to see the movie. I'd never seen it. And I got introduced midway through. So after then going home and watching all of them of, wow, I came in midway through this series, I should see them all, I fell in love with the ridiculousness of it, that then I was amped and ready to go see in, 2015, Fast 7 or Furious 7.
Damn, which one was that now?
I forget.
That's the last one with Paul Walker.
Oh, that was a good one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
This isn't a sequel I hate. This is a sequel I love, because I think the whole series of Fast and the Furious gets so poorly maligned over the ridiculousness of it, instead of just sitting down and enjoying, like, yeah, it's ridiculous, just have fun. Yes, they used to have an entire movie about boosting DVDs off the back of the truck, and now we sent 2 of them into space. It's only going to get weirder from there. But I think 7 was such a great addition to the series of a nice send-off for Paul Walker. Like, you get action sequences where everybody gets to shine here and there. It's just so many ridiculous, like, one-liners and sequences that are still eye-rolling. Like the whole the thing about street fights is the street fights back or whatever it is.
Oh,
and then
God.
he just
Street always wins.
stomps a parking lot and just caves it in. I'm
so
here
that was
for
when
all of it.
Statham was still a bad guy?
Yes,
Who's he? Okay.
yeah. So because the previous movie was with, I think, Owen Shaw, played by Luke Evans, and that's the one with Giselle and whatnot. And then the plane takes off at the end, and they end up having the big long chase sequence. But they take down
on the runway. Yeah,
his
yeah.
character, and then Jason Statham is the brother that then shows up in the next movie to look for revenge and introduce him into the series.
That's where it opens. He's at the devastation of the hospital, him just to go to see his brother, right?
Yeah.
Is that how that starts?
So I mean that's the introduction of him into the series, where now he's just become like a staple in the Fast series. Plus you get all of the back retcon of, oh, you remember it during the sequence in Fast and the Furious 3 Tokyo Drift when something happens to one of their team. Now you find out it was secretly him behind the scenes. Like, all this ridiculous stuff.
Right.
That, for all the things I laugh at of bad script writing in Mortal Kombat 2, also bad script writing in this, but in a way that I'm just like, no, this is a blast. Let's do this.
That's how I looked at the second one, honestly. I think that's exactly it. It's just, I had a lot of fun with it. And Fast and the Furious definitely has better script writing, but the events that happen through the movie just gets more and more ridiculous with each one.
I think Annihilation is just a mess, but the Fast and the Furious knows what it is and leans into it in a good way.
Yeah, it's more of a wink to the audience.
I mean, I am right there with you. Like, I hope that each one gets more ridiculous and bigger than the next, because they know how to do the spectacle, and the cheesiness factor, I think, makes it fun.
Yeah.
Because they lean into it, I think, and it's like they know what they're making, and they do it well.
Like, if the end of the Fast and the Furious series, like the finale doesn't end with them using like secret government technology where they have mech suits that are based around like a Dodge Charger, a Ford Mustang, a Suzuki or a Subaru WRX, and all of them getting inside and fighting against people, I will be disappointed, because that's the only thing left for them to do other than time travel.
Aren't they?
I mean, crossing over with Transformers at that point, I think makes a lot of sense.
No, aren't they supposed to do like a crossover with Jurassic Park?
I don't think that's official. I know I think it was I was gonna say somebody covered this. Yeah, we covered this. I think back during our like first 3 Rule of Thirds, where the director, I guess in an interview, had talked about how he would be interested and excited to do a crossover. I don't know if it was Jurassic World talking about Fast and the Furious or vice versa, but one of them was like, oh yeah, I would be on board for a crossover. I have no idea how that would work.
That's a weird franchise, I think, to cross over with.
I would sooner see Transformers than I would Jurassic Park.
Yeah. Especially because Transformers has essentially introduced what you're talking about, and it's mech suit transformer technology, essentially. Yeah, it's hard for me to separate the movies, like which sequence comes in what movie. And I still haven't seen the Jason Momoa one, but I remember enjoying number 7.
The
The
Jason
Momoa
Momoa one,
one, I slept through that one. I didn't like it.
I didn't have an issue with it. I think Jason Momoa got to really play a fun, wacky, like
Yeah.
borderline like muscle-bound Joker-esque kind of thing that I think was really interesting, especially being able to see from him. So that's that. Go see all the movies. I'm sure they're ending it after. I think the next one's the last one, but
That would be 10.
no, 10 already came out. So this is either going to be 11 or I think 11. Yeah.
I thought hard, and I really wanted to do a sequel that I really enjoyed, but most of them it would turn into its own episode for an actual screen refresh thing, because like between Alien, Terminator, I mean, those are literally some of the best sequels of all time. But then you have other things like, Blade. I liked his sequels. And, the same thing with like Fast and the Furious. There's so many different ones that you can easily pick. So there's a few that just resonated with me, but in the other way. And 1994 debuted one of the biggest movies that would, I don't want to say alter my how I am as a person, but it was a really big movie in my childhood. And then it took them 20 years to make the sequel. And when they finally did, I really wish I can get back those 2 hours, because I actually tried rewatching it today, but I refused to give anybody money for it. And that is the sequel to Dumb and Dumber 2.
Oh, I didn't even watch this just because of it. I couldn't bring myself.
It was bad. When Harry Met Lloyd, which was technically a prequel, wasn't bad. It wasn't great, but it had that 2000s comedy vibe to it, that whole just like straight to DVD vibe. And like, it was fine. It wasn't great, but I mean, I wasn't like offended by it. But then when they finally announced a sequel to Dumb and Dumber with Jeff Daniels and Jim Carrey reprising their roles respectively as, the two guys, I'm like, oh, cool. And oh man, like, it's just the first joke where, who is it? Jim Carrey pretends to be catatonic and in a fugue state for 30 years or 20 years in this case, just as a joke. Like, that just hit so flat. And that's the first joke in the movie that you see, Jeff Daniels going to the nursing home where, Jim Carrey is, and, trying to take care of him. And then just out of nowhere, just, nope, it was a joke. I'm all good. What do you want to do? And then Jeff Daniels is just like in a fucking stupor. Like, are you, what? This whole time? And that set the mood for the whole rest of the movie for me. And then the whole rest of it, I really did want to rewatch it just so I can kind of get caught up on what it was and bring up finer points on what made me hate it so much. But just people in my circle constantly say like, oh, this ruined Star Wars for me. This ruined a lot of like things that Disney's doing with Star Wars. It ruined my childhood. The Dumb and Dumber movie did that to me, with how much it was just, it fell so flat and it felt so hollow compared to, at least, like, just because you didn't like things that were new in the Star Wars sequels doesn't have that same kind of bearing. This movie's already kind of empty as it is with Dumb and Dumber of all things, but just the way that it was.
Now, do you think it's worse, the fact that it was this legacy sequel of wait 20 years and then it's bad? Does that hurt more than if they decided in like 1996 to do Dumb and Dumber 2 and then it was bad back then?
I don't know, because it would have been a completely different story.
I think, I mean, both those actors, especially Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey, I mean, has gone through some shit. I don't know if he went through as much shit before making that movie, but I think them just probably getting older literally just had an effect on them and the sensibilities and the filmmaker's sensibilities that I think a sequel 2 years later probably would have been, I don't want to say as good as the first one, but sight unseen, probably better than what eventually came out.
Yeah, because I mean, the sequel revolves around the fact that Harry needs a new kidney, and he tries to find his long lost daughter in order for him to possibly get a new kidney. This is me looking up Google. I read it once. I didn't write it down, but because at that point I tried really hard to find the movie to watch and I couldn't. But they wouldn't be able to do that if it was like just 2 years later kind of thing. I mean, they could have, but it would have been a much younger child versus this girl is now an adult.
So much worse if they're trying to hunt down this child to take their kidney.
I mean, it might have been
it's
funnier
not even your
too.
size.
Like,
It won't even fit.
yeah, I mean, dumb enough, but still. And then I think the blurb mentioned on how even that was a joke. Like, no, I don't really need it. Like, what are you doing? Like, of all things, it's like they forgot how to write those characters and then flash forward and just made a bunch of, what would be funny jokes because these guys are dumb, quote unquote. It just fell flat to me, and it really didn't do it. Same thing with Hot Tub Time Machine. That was an honorable mention, but I didn't care for it wasn't like that much of a world breaking thing for me. It was just like, oh, this was terrible. I liked the first one. The second one was just as bad as Dumb and Dumber 2 in my eyes. But anyway, yeah, Dumb and Dumber 2, spelled T-O. Not
Yeah, I probably
T-W-O.
won't watch it then.
I figured it was going to be on the top of your list.
Yeah.
I'm just out of kind of a morbid curiosity. I just want to see. I mean, I guess I can just watch clips on YouTube, just get a taste without it dampening my enjoyment of the first one. Because I'm curious to see like how that translated to whatever 20 years later or however long it came out after that. 2014. So yeah, 20 years exactly. Like Nick said.
Vince Vaughn was recently on Hot Ones, and he talked to Sean Evans about how they don't make those kinds of comedies anymore that was abundant in the 2000s. And it's just, he went into his reasoning behind it, and it really felt like this movie should have been made in that time frame. It might have excelled a little bit better, but I'm pretty sure Jim Carrey was in like his minor retirement at that point. He wasn't acting. He wasn't really doing anything. I think he was just focusing on himself at that point. And that's why he, I think this is one of the things that he did when he came out of his quote unquote retirement. Cause I remember like he grew that long beard. He got into like painting art, and he really wasn't doing anything like that. Meanwhile, I think Jeff Daniels was doing like those political dramas on HBO.
Oh, Newsroom?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think Dumb and Dumber 2 was just after Jim Carrey was doing like number 23 and whatnot, if I recall.
Give or take.
Yeah, he had transitioned to being way more versatile with acting than Lloyd Christmas.
Yeah.
And I think just if it would have been made in that time frame instead, might have been given better writers. I don't fault the actors. They did what they were given. And even their chemistry is still there after, the 20 years. But it was really, I think, just the writing that failed it for me anyway. Because that really, I mean, they're fine actors. The cast has it's pretty stacked, if you ask me. And with everyone that's in it, Laurie Holden, Kathleen Turner, Bill Murray's in it apparently.
Apparently, he must have
Our
not been looking at
sources
the
say.
screen, which I understand at this point.
But yeah,
Another movie that'll never be on Screen Refresh then.
nope, never.
Mine might
Never,
be.
ever.
My original one might be. I would like to do Dumb and Dumber at one point. Eventually, maybe.
It's just, I mean, for me and you, we'll just be
Us quoting the movie.
reciting lines from the movie the whole time. Harry, I took care of it.
Pretty bird. Pretty true.
I think the rest of my screen refresh picks are just going to be ones that I'm just going to try to grate on Tim's sensibilities as much as I can.
Just this whole time you've had an extra pair of gloves. Yeah, we're in the Rockies.
I wish Drop Dead Fred was more popular, so there was like 5 or 6 movies to choose from, all the sequels.
I find it odd that like I like highbrow movies. I like a lot of schlock. Like I watch really bad horror movies and I still find enjoyment in it. But somehow you find films that doesn't hit even that mark for me, where it's like somehow even my low taste meter, it's like it still doesn't qualify for this.
I mean, Drop Dead Fred was really just it was really a truly like, let me watch this again. I remember watching this as a kid. And,
well, our
that was an
listeners
experiment.
apparently feel the same exact way. Much to Tim's chagrin, listeners,
You're all part of this problem.
we don't talk numbers much, but Drop Dead Fred is one of our most listened to episodes. I don't know.
Gangbusters.
I don't know
I
the
think
numbers.
because it's one of those movies.
I know it's
Or
probably
it's
Dean
like-
on like
it's-
50 burner accounts.
I paid a bunch of bots to just load that episode as much as possible. I think that's just one of those movies where people are like, "Oh yeah, I did see that," and maybe it was just pure,
Fever Dream.
just like, "Oh, I want to see what was this." And
I mean, yeah, it was
crashed
probably
in that
like
way. I
there's
don't know.
well, there's 50 different shows talking about Mortal Kombat, but there's only one show talking about Drop Dead Fred.
And that concludes our episode of sequels. I know everyone always says this, but likes and subscribing really helps the channel out. If you like what you've heard, please drop a review, rating, and subscribe to us on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcasts to help us out. You can find us on Instagram at Screen Refresh. Smash that like and subscribe button over on YouTube at the Screen Refresh Network, or shoot us an email at screenrefresh@gmail.com so you can hear what your top 3 choices would be, or suggest other topics to make episodes on. So for Tim, Dean, this is Nick. You take care of yourself, and you catch us next on Rule of Thirds, airing every 3rd Monday of the month, and also our sister podcast, Don't Open This Podcast, every 2nd and 4th Monday of the month.